I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. Have you ever witnessed a car crash or something really unusual that startled you? Ever wonder if your memory of what exactly happened, if it's 100% correct? I'd answer yes to both questions. Both my sisters are lawyers, and in law school I remember they were taught that people's memories are terrible, that two people can see the same thing, witness the very same thing, and remember it very differently. I bring that up because we're going to be talking about police body cameras tonight, which would seem to be a simple way to take the memory error out of that equation. It's an objective recording of what actually happened. Despite that, it's taking years for Portland to start using them. Perhaps an example of a city to our south will help give Portland a little bit of a nudge. Police body cameras, that's our big story tonight. The Department of Justice reports that 80% of big police departments across the country use the police body cameras. Portland does not. In fact, it's the last big city department still not using them. We're going to talk about them more in a moment. But first, let's take a look at a nearby agency that appears to be a success story with these. Salem Police began wearing body cameras this week, on Monday, in fact. I talked with the chief, Trevor Womack, this afternoon.
It's going well. I think that I was actually pretty impressed for such a big technology system to be implemented. We were a little concerned about how that might go. Usually there's glitches and so forth, but I think the amount of preparation we put into this paid off because we've had really no issues.
Salem Police worked over the past 2 years to get the program in place and launched it Monday. Monday night, officers rushed to a shooting in Salem. 3 people shot. One of those died. The chief said those body cameras are already helping with that investigation.
Yes, that's one of the benefits of the camera system that I believed from the start. And you're correct, especially a scene like that where you arrive, there's multiple people shot, which is a chaotic situation. There's a lot of people, as officers are arriving, there's a lot of people still there, roaming around, leaving, coming. And so the difference there is that from the start, the time the officers arrive or begin to capture that video, you're seeing license plates and vehicles that might be leaving, people's faces. You don't know if these are victims or witnesses or suspects. And so that did prove valuable already. It's a tool for follow-up investigators especially, and we're using it in that way just for that case you mentioned.
So think about that for a moment. Think about all the information being lost by departments not using body cameras. Vancouver, by the way, is not using them, but they told us they're going to launch their program by the end of this month. Good for you. That leaves Portland. 8 years of discussions and still no body cameras. The fundamental hangup is whether officers can view the footage before they write their reports. The cops want to do it, but the Federal Justice Department and the community activists say they should not. Now, Chief Womack did not want to comment on the Portland issue or any other department not using these cameras. In fact, he didn't want to get anywhere near that, so I hope that's clear. He's only talking to us about how it's going with his department. But he is quite clear in his thinking on the topic. Body cameras are a good tool. Allowing officers to view the video as they write their reports is common sense to him.
And I think about it this way, Pat. I started in 1992. We weren't even using email yet. And I remembered I was issued a little notepad with a pen, right? And every call I went to, I would take notes about everything that happened. And I'm observing and I'm talking to everybody. And then when I went back to the office, it might be that night or 2 days later when I had to write this report, I would pull out my notepad and I would review my notes. Because my memory is not perfect, I can't remember all those details. I would review my notes and I would write an accurate report based on those notes. This is Notepad 3.0, right? This is a technological way to capture what's happening and refresh an officer's memory to make sure the report is as thorough and as accurate as possible. Why wouldn't I want officers to have that information?
Okay, and just because you haven't specifically said it clearly, they are able to review that as they're writing the reports?
Yes, the only time that they're not going to be able to review that necessarily is for the big serious critical incidents, right? An officer-involved shooting, for example, a fatal use of force. We don't investigate ourselves, of course. We have a process here where an outside agency conducts that investigation. They would be in charge of that investigative process, and our district attorney as well. And their position is that officers would not view that video before that interview occurs, for example. But other than that, for the most part, officers can view the video, and I believe they should before they write a report or give a statement about something.
So there's that. But in Portland, the freeze on body cameras continues. In fact, it might even be getting a little bit colder. The police union and the city have been negotiating recently, trying to resolve their stalemate on the body cameras. But this week, they basically gave up and declared an impasse. Now it's going to go to an arbitrator, which could add 6 to 9 months on this ever-growing delay. And the Justice Department, by the way, has reserved the right to approve or reject anything that the arbitrator decides. It's been a long road.
How'd we get here? In the fall of 2014, a federal judge urged the city of Portland to put cameras on its officers, even though the U.S. Justice Department did not require it back then. The mayor at the time, Charlie Hales, said, sure. The Bureau even set aside money and held some community hearings to get ideas. By 2015, things seemed to be on cruise control. The Oregon legislature passed a bill that created a statewide standard for body camera usage, and Portland City Council put aside more than $830,000 to put even more cameras in police cars. And the city pledged another $1.6 million to fund the program through the next fiscal year. Then, another year and a different mayor later, things hit a snag. Mayor Ted Wheeler questioned if the project was feasible and asked the Police Bureau for a detailed plan, including how much the cameras would actually cost. The police chief at the time, Mike Marshman, summed it up by saying, "That's in a nutshell why we don't have body cameras today." But fast forward to January of 2019, and there was another opportunity. Portland Police formed a team to finally come up with that detailed plan the mayor had wanted to see. And in February 2019, the city held listening sessions. A year later, in early 2020, then Chief Jamie Resch said she supported body cameras and hoped to see a pilot program in the future. But once again, the plan hit a snag because the COVID pandemic blew out the city's budget, and the body camera pilot project was one of many things that ended up on the chopping block. And that's how we got here.
Things appeared to be back on track in 2021, and then last year the city picked the Axon Company to run a pilot program with the hopes of that getting up and running by the end of this year. But now the city and police union cannot come to an agreement. They're basically throwing their hands in the air, asking that arbitrator to make the decisions. Both the city and the union will release their final offers to each other and to the public tomorrow. It's when we will find out the exact issues keeping them apart. But we know the question of whether officers can watch the video before writing their report, that's a big one. It's also worth noting that most police agencies in Oregon do allow officers to see the video first. They include Oregon State Police, Gresham, Forest Grove, Beaverton, Eugene, and as I mentioned earlier, Salem. So what's going through your mind on all this? What are you thinking about this? You could send us an email. Please do. Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. We love your feedback. And tomorrow we hope to bring you more details about the impasse between the city of Portland and the police union on the body cam policy to see where we go from here. Now let's talk some more about what we are calling Bourbongate. Yesterday, we told you about the drama with the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission after the Oregonian learned about an investigation that took place last year. It found that the top OLCC officials were setting aside rare bourbons like Pappy Van Winkle so they could buy it themselves rather than allowing the public to have a chance. And it was not a one-time thing. The practice was going on apparently for at least 8 years and involved 6 top managers, including the executive director, Steve Marks, and his second in command. Marks resigned effective yesterday. Governor Tina Kotek has called for the firing of everyone involved, but so far, only Marks is out of a job. Attorney General Ellen Rosenblum is also involved, opening a criminal investigation into the practice. The volunteer board of the Oregon Liquor and Cannabis Commission oversees the distilled spirits program at the center of all of this. And yesterday, we showed you the chairman of the board's diatribe during a public meeting. Not upset with the people he's meant to oversee, by the way, but angry about his treatment in the press, defending himself and the board at every turn, even though he knew about the investigation into Bourbongate back in September. He says he was told there was a full investigation, finding of fact, and it was documented in the employee files, and that because of involving employees, it was all confidential. So he did nothing further. Then we asked for your thoughts on the controversy, and hello, you had plenty to say.
Just saw your story on the Oregon Liquor Commission and the executive director and the fact that he dodged all of his responsibility as well as the board's to oversee the team that was managing the distribution of liquor in the state of Oregon. Whether or not he's a volunteer, as a director of a corporation on a board, he's responsible for all that goes on, and his cop-out for confidentiality is just plain wrong and sad.
Many more of you said the OLCC and the board needs to clean house.
I think all those individuals in the OLCC should be terminated. That's disgusting what they've done.
Including the volunteers on board.
Including the volunteers on the board. Thank you.
I just watched your story with the OLCC chairman of the board defending himself. The question that really needs to be asked is, while he kept repeating they didn't know anything, is why didn't you know anything? Isn't it your job to oversee this organization, to make sure things like this don't happen? I mean, you may be honest, sir, but you're also incompetent or just not doing your job. Either way, you ought to, if you had any honor, resign, and the whole board ought to resign. And let's start over with people that actually know what they're doing and will oversee this agency properly. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Ken. In my opinion, regarding the OLCC, they should clean house and start over.
So a lot of strong opinions there. Lauren says, Pappy Van Winkle, I've been in the lottery for a couple of years now, never win, of course, and felt okay about that until now. Fire them all. Government is supposed to be tighter than the corporate world. Just not the case here. Jim also lamented about how difficult it is to get that booze. I'm a collector of bourbon with more than 100 bottles, and I have one bottle of Van Winkle 10-year, and what I had to go through to get it and roughly 8 years of trying is ridiculous. But we want both sides here, so we'll tell you not everyone was all that mad about this, including Tracy, who said, in a nutshell, they didn't do anything wrong. They were told action was taken, it was confidential, the board doesn't get paid. Seriously, it's not really that big of a deal. In Kentucky, it sells for a regular price, and they have tons. So it's not rare nor hard to get if you really want it. A viewer who did not leave a name said, who cares about a few bottles of expensive bourbon? You can get meth, fentanyl, heroin, and other hard drugs for pennies on any street corner in Portland. And many of you had differing views on whether or not it was a big deal, but many of you did agree on one thing. Larry says, I couldn't care less. The OLCC should be eliminated anyway. They're a useless waste of money. I'm in agreement that they should have stepped down, but this is such a red herring issue.
The OLCC issue that is on tonight's program brings up something that a lot of us taxpayers have been wondering about, and that is, why do they even exist? Washington State eliminated their Liquor Control Commission, and that sounds like something that we should do. It would seem to be a good time to eliminate the Liquor Control Commission, and I think that's something that we've been talking about for years. Thank you.
Washington State did privatize their liquor sales back in 2011 and 2012, and many of you argue there's just no need for the OLCC here in Oregon. So after this scandal, away with it, you say. But we'd love to hear more of what you're thinking about all this tonight. Did any of those opinions change your mind, move you one way or the other, or do you still feel strongly one way or another? Please let us know. Send us an email to thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.
It's just unusual and very insidious.
2 pipe bombs hidden in household items, planted just miles apart in Moses Lake, Washington, killing 2 men with no connection to each other.
Detectives have been perplexed by this for many, many years.
Despite over a decade of investigating, no arrests.
We've never been able to establish or pinpoint exactly who could have planted these bombs.
But this cold case is warming up thanks to new evidence and technology. That's next, when the story returns.
Welcome back. Tonight we're taking a hard look at a pair of murders in the state of Washington that happened just hours apart in the town of Moses Lake. That's about a 3-hour drive east of Seattle. 2 pipe bombs hidden inside household objects exploded, killing 2 men. The victims didn't know each other, but detectives say the bombs are connected. After more than a decade of dead ends now, detectives say they have new evidence they're testing with new technology, and they're hoping it gives them a lead they've been searching for. Here's Madison Wade from our sister station King 5 in Seattle.
Told this story so many times I have it memorized.
It's not something you'd expect in a little town.
Developing story from Moses Lake tonight after a fatal explosion.
Something exploded like a bomb.
He took a direct hit.
Detectives have been perplexed by this for many, many years.
Now they still need the public's help to solve this crime.
We've never been able to establish or pinpoint exactly who could have planted these bombs. We're hoping this one does it. On that morning back in 2008, William Walker, who was a retired electrician from Ohio, came out of his house and he found a battery charger outside of his shop. He took it inside of his shop, and when he plugged it in, there was an IED inside of that battery charger, and it detonated and killed him instantly.
What does this property mean to you?
It's my grandpa's property. Where he was killed 14 years ago. He wasn't someone you would picture someone would target to kill. Why would someone do that to a 69-year-old man who did anything he could for anybody?
We've always believed that Bill was the victim of mistaken identity.
It was the second explosion in Moses Lake in 2 days.
No one expected 10 hours later a second bomb would go off, killing another man.
And that was just about 5 to 7 miles away at another home. There was a police scanner that was left in a sack outside of his home. We're not sure how the sack and the police scanner got inside the home, but he brought it inside, or somebody brought it inside, put it on the kitchen counter, and it detonated.
53-year-old Javier Martinez Adame was killed instantly.
It was my dad. And I want to cry. And that's why I don't talk about it. Because I don't want to cry.
Are there tissues nearby? I can go grab for you.
Well, like, I'm going to cry no matter what. Yeah. I'm going to cry no matter what. The entire lot was blocked off by police and personnel, and there was a lot of different agencies there, and they wouldn't let us cross the driveway.
Something serious was happening. 2 bombs killing 2 men within 10 hours of each other.
How could this have happened to two different men way across town who really didn't have any connections? What was the reason behind somebody did this to them?
Detectives were never really sure what the connection was between William Walker and Javier Adame. The bomb that killed William Walker and the bomb that killed Javier Adame were clearly made by the same people.
It's just unusual and very insidious. Real malice of forethought occurred here. Somebody built a bomb, they disguised a bomb, designed it in such a way that it'd be operated by the victim.
Detectives were able to recover a lot of evidence from the scene, and they tell me the police scanner and the car battery charger used in these attacks are items anyone can buy off the shelf, and it wasn't unusual for the victims to have these items.
Fireworks powders, flash powders, which are related to fireworks, black powders, smokeless powders, all these things are readily available.
Clearly this was the work of someone who was very skilled, had a very sophisticated skill set. There's nothing that's happened since 2008 that's even come close or has any resemblance to the bombings that happened back then.
This door was on the shop the day my grandpa was killed. And so we took it off when it got changed, and we just put pictures of memories of him on it.
It being unsolved, it's on the forefront of our memories all the time because we really want to get it solved.
Somebody out there knows something. I beg you, please say something if you know something. They deserve justice. We want answers. He deserves to rest in peace.
If for some reason you have a tip about this case, investigators would love to hear from you. The number is right there at the bottom of your screen. Call the Grant County Sheriff's Office, 509-754-2018. And it's worth noting that our sister station in Seattle has a team that looks into missing person cases, murders, and other mysteries. If you have a case that you'd like them to look into that happened in Washington State, find this Moses Lake story on KGW.com, then scroll down to the bottom of the article. There you'll find this form where you can fill out the information about the case and submit it to them. Coming up next on the story, we're going to lighten things up a little bit and hopefully learn something along the way. Step outside and you'll likely spot a maple tree of some sort. Inside that tree, sweet, sappy secrets. It's not just Canadians who can make great syrup. It's happening right here in Oregon, too. We'll show you how it's done when the story returns. Move over, Canada and Vermont. Oregon is getting into the maple syrup game. And turns out it's harvest season at the Oregon Maple Project. Stephen Redlin went to find out what makes our syrup stand out.
In the winter time of year, the idea of growth and abundance takes on a different meaning. But this is the perfect time of year for one sweet harvest.
We do have big leaf maples all over Camp Colton.
Near Estacada, there are lots of maples. Right now, without leaves, they may look dormant.
Catching sunlight after a frost is always a good thing to get a maple flowing.
The maple trees are flowing with sap.
Sap.
Eliza Nelson started the Oregon Maple Project Group in 2020.
Let's see. Well, this one we tapped on a bucket and see what we've got. Nothing from this tree.
This 100-year-old maple isn't flowing today, but the smaller trees are.
These young ones really flow readily with sap. And when we tap, we are always making sure to avoid the tap hole from last year.
Maybe if it's closer to water, that might help, but it's really hard to tell.
Ben Malvin taps his family's trees for sap.
You can just take a sample to try it. That tastes incredible. It actually tastes sweeter than a lot of the sap I've had. I feel like that's pretty high sugar content.
That means less boiling on the way to syrup. It takes some 86 gallons of sap cooked down to make 1 gallon of syrup.
A little bit of sugar sand in the bottom. There's always a little bit that settles.
The syrup is the goal.
Pretty amazing taste.
Working with Oregon State University, the Oregon Maple Project is encouraging use of this renewable resource. The West Coast syrup is unique, described as complex, caramely, with a woodsy character and the taste of vanilla.
I don't know anyone who doesn't like maple syrup.
Bella Lehman interns at the Oregon Maple Project. Today, she's installing a new tap.
There we go. And most people don't know that you can actually make maple syrup on the West Coast. Everyone's like, oh, it's just an East Coast and Northeastern thing.
The buckets are one way to collect. There's another way, too. Powered by some pumping and gravity, lots of tubes link the taps to the sugar shack. And next month, it'll be ready to go.
You gotta clean it out.
I'm not wasting any of that.
No.
At the Sugar Shack in Colton, Oregon. Cheers. I'm Stephen Redlin, KGW News.
Looks tasty. All right, keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. We're going to wrap things up right after this. Well, that's the end of our show. Thanks so much for watching. And remember, the story, our story, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow.